Today we are running a special, but first of all, hey everyone, welcome back to Q in Charge. I'm your host, Joe the Q, and today we're diving into one of the most important topics shaping the future of the electric vehicle industry. By the way, this was requested by several listeners to get more information and details, so it took me some time to collect it all, and there is the reason behind. Nevertheless, we've all seen the headlines about electric vehicles, how they're supposed to be the future of transportation, how governments are pushing for cleaner energy, and how companies are racing to dominate this space. Lately, however, the electric vehicle market has hit a few speed bumps, particularly here in the US. We're going to talk about what's really going on behind the scenes, from rising inflation and interest rates making electric cars harder to afford, to people moving from high tax states like California to more business-friendly places like Texas and Florida. These regional differences are creating a fragmented market. And let's not forget the big oil companies and traditional automakers who are not going down without a fight. So why is the electric vehicle industry slowing down, and what can we do to navigate this rough terrain? Stick around, because we're about to dig deep into how migration, politics, and economic shifts are affecting electric vehicle adoption and what this means for the future of sustainable transportation. Let's charge into it. The electric vehicle industry has long been positioned as the future of transportation. Over the past decade, it has attracted billions in investment, spurred countless innovations, and sparked a global movement towards greener, more sustainable energy solutions. For years, electric cars were hailed as the natural successor to internal combustion engine vehicles, offering the cleaner, more efficient way to get around. Government policies, environmental incentives, and advancements in battery technology all seem to point to an inevitable future where electric cars would dominate the roads. But today, the electric vehicle industry is facing challenges that few saw coming. In the United States, in particular, the momentum that once carried the industry forward has slowed. Despite continued interest from policymakers and the public, a convergence of economic, political, and consumer-related issues has introduced hurdles to the growth of electric vehicles. While the long-term outlook for electric cars remains optimistic, the immediate future is fraught with uncertainty. Let's take a closer look at the key factors contributing to this slowdown and explore how the electric vehicle industry can overcome these obstacles and emerge stronger than ever. The first one is the economic challenges like inflation and rising interest rates. The global economy is currently grappling with one of the most significant inflationary periods in recent memory. Inflation in the US and worldwide surged to multi-decade highs in 2022, and while some of those pressures have begun to ease, the lingering effects are still being felt. For consumers, this means everything is more expensive, from housing and food to consumer goods and services. The electric vehicle industry has not been immune to these pressures. In fact, inflation has had a particularly strong impact on the affordability of electric cars. On average, electric vehicles cost between $53,000 and $60,000, significantly more than the typical ICE vehicle, which averages around $48,000. And we are talking here on average. They are cheaper in the $30,000 range, but not many options. And some people do not want to settle for something that is cheap, but by technology, not superior or poor features. Even though people cannot afford cars that are over $30,000, they would still rather wait for the market to drop the prices and be more affordable. But we don't know when and if it will happen. Maybe when Chinese vehicles hit the market, we will finally get some light bulbs turn on in our politicians' heads, if there's anything to turn on. For many consumers, especially those in the middle income bracket, this price difference has made purchasing an electric vehicle an increasingly difficult proposition. While the long-term savings from reduced fuel and maintenance costs are well documented, the high upfront price remains a barrier to entry. Furthermore, the Federal Reserve's decision to raise interest rates to combat inflation has compounded the problem. Higher interest rates mean higher borrowing costs for consumers who need to finance a vehicle purchase. For those considering an electric vehicle, The combination of a higher sticker price and increased loan costs has forced many to delay their purchase or look for cheaper alternative. This is particularly significant given that a large portion of U.S. car buyers rely on financing to make their purchases. When faced with rising loan payments, some consumers have opted to hold onto their current vehicles for longer, delaying their transition to electric vehicles. Or, as a matter of fact, a new gas vehicle too. And don't get me wrong, this is happening the same for gas or diesel vehicle. No one is buying them, at least not like a couple of years before. Could it be that the entire nation is just waiting on elections? That brings us to the next topic in today's episode, and that is the political influences and regulatory uncertainty. Another critical factor in the slowdown of the electric vehicle industry is the political and regulatory landscape. In the U.S., government support for electric cars remains strong. The Biden administration has introduced numerous policies aimed at accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles, including the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which allocated $7.5 billion for the expansion of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Additionally, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 provided tax credits to incentivize electric vehicle purchases. However, despite these efforts, the industry has faced significant political pushback. In late 2023, the U.S. Senate voted to overturn a waiver of Buy America requirements for government-funded electric vehicle charging stations. This decision introduced delays to the rollout of critical infrastructure and added uncertainty to the market. Moreover, political divisions between states have led to inconsistencies in how electric vehicles are adopted across the country. In California, where strict emission standards and government incentives have driven rapid electric vehicle adoption, the market continues to grow. However, in states where energy costs are lower and fossil fuels remain a dominant energy source, electric vehicle adoption has been slower. The result is a fragmented national market, where consumers in certain regions have better access to electric cars and charging infrastructure than others. Another challenge has been the geopolitical tensions surrounding the supply chain for electric vehicle components. Many of the materials required for electric vehicle batteries, such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel, are sourced from countries like China. Rising concerns about dependence on Chinese imports have led to calls for increased domestic production of these materials, but building out new supply chains will take time and require significant investment. In the meantime, supply chain disruptions and protectionist trade policies have driven up costs for electric vehicle manufacturers. Now, this brings us to conventional automakers and their issues with the industry. Pushback from the oil industry and traditional automakers is noticeable. Some automakers placed a pause on making electric cars, even though they announced not so long ago that they would go full electric. As an example, Volvo made that decision a couple weeks ago. The electric vehicle industry's rise poses an existential threat to the oil industry, which has long dominated the global energy market. As electric vehicles grow in popularity, demand for gasoline is expected to decline, potentially shrinking the market for oil producers. In response, oil companies have mounted lobbying efforts to slow down the transition to electric vehicles. These efforts include promoting alternative technologies such as hydrogen fuel cells, which some argue could compete with electric vehicles as the future of transportation. At the same time, traditional automakers are also grappling with the shift to electric vehicles. While many companies such as Ford, General Motors, and Volkswagen have announced ambitious plans to transition their fleets to electric, they remain cautious. For many automakers, ICE vehicles still represent a significant portion of their revenue. As a result, some manufacturers have adopted a more gradual approach, continuing to invest in hybrid technologies while ramping up electric vehicle production. For example, Ford recently scaled back production of its all-electric F-150 Lightning in response to slower than expected demand, while increasing production of its hybrid models. This strategy allows the company to hedge its bets while navigating an uncertain market. And let's not forget about the supply chain disruptions and production challenges, especially domestically as we rely heavily on overseas resources that are in high demand globally. To make matters worse, we're also hindering our own progress with new policies and mandates that slow down the industry's ability to adapt and grow. Supply chain disruptions have become one of the most significant hurdles for the electric vehicle industry, impacting everything from production timelines to vehicle affordability. While many industries have experienced disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical tensions, and logistical bottlenecks, the electric vehicle sector has been particularly vulnerable because of its reliance on a select group of critical raw materials. The batteries that power electric vehicles depend heavily on materials such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel. These materials are not only expensive, but are also often sourced from politically unstable regions, creating additional layers of complexity in securing a reliable supply. Lithium, for example, is an essential component in lithium-ion batteries, which are used in nearly all electric cars. The demand for lithium has surged in recent years due to the rapid expansion of the electric vehicle market, leading to price spikes and increased competition for the limited supply. According to the International Energy Agency, demand for lithium is expected to grow by 40 times by 2040 as the world continues to shift towards clean energy. However, much of the world's lithium supply comes from a few countries such as Chile, Argentina, and Australia, making the supply chain vulnerable to regional disruptions. Similar to cobalt and nickel, which are used to enhance the energy density and longevity of electric vehicle batteries, face supply constraints. Cobalt, in particular, is mostly mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country often marred by political instability and labor concerns. Human rights issues, including the use of child labor in cobalt mining, have also prompted calls for ethical sourcing, further complicating the supply chain. Nickel, while more widely available, has seen price increases due to its dual role in both the electric vehicle industry and traditional sectors such as stainless steel production. The soaring prices of these essential materials have significantly increased the cost of producing electric vehicles. While the cost of lithium-ion batteries has declined over the years due to advancements in technology and economies of scale, these reductions have been offset by the rising cost of raw materials. In 2021 and 2022, the price of lithium alone surged by over 500%, causing a ripple effect throughout the electric vehicle supply chain. As a result, the automakers are faced with difficult decisions: either absorb these additional costs, which affects their profit margins, or pass them on to consumers, which risks dampening demand in an already price-sensitive market. In addition to supply chain challenges, the production of electric vehicles remains a more complex and costly process compared to traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. Automakers have spent over a century refining the processes involved in building ICE vehicles, optimizing every stage of production to reduce costs and increase efficiency. By contrast, electric vehicle manufacturing is still in its relative infancy, and the industry is grappling with the steep learning curve associated with the mass production of these vehicles. One of the key challenges in electric vehicle production is the battery itself. While the internal combustion engine has seen incremental improvements over time, the electric vehicle battery is a rapidly evolving technology. Automakers are constantly working to improve battery energy density, charging speed, and safety, but this continuous innovation requires significant investment in research and development. Moreover, battery manufacturing is highly specialized, with many automakers still relying on external suppliers for battery cells. This dependence on third-party manufacturers adds another layer of complexity and risk to the supply chain, as any disruption in battery production can delay vehicle rollouts. Another challenge is the need to retrofit or completely overhaul existing manufacturing facilities. Most automakers have production lines designed for ICE vehicles, which are not easily adaptable for electric vehicle production. Converting these facilities to produce electric vehicles requires substantial capital investment, and in some cases, automakers are choosing to build entirely new plants specifically for electric vehicle manufacturing. For instance, companies like Ford and General Motors have announced plans to construct gigafactories dedicated to electric vehicle battery production and vehicle assembly. While these investments will pay off in the long term, they contribute to the current high cost of electric vehicle production. Retooling plants and adapting supply chains for electric vehicle production also involves retraining the workforce. Workers who have spent decades building ICE vehicles need to learn new skills to assemble electric vehicles, and this transition is not always smooth. Automakers are investing in upskilling programs to ensure their workforce can meet the demands of electric vehicle production. But this takes time and resources. In the meantime, labor shortages and the need for specialized technical knowledge have slowed down production at several facilities. Word from our sponsor. There are so many questions and uncertainty, but it is all achievable. Just find the right partners that will provide that help. One of them is QCharge. Simply visit www.qcharge123.com. So we suggest you simply download their app today, QCharge. Powering your journey one charge at a time. Let us continue where we stop. Geopolitical tensions have also played a significant role in supply chain disruptions for the electric vehicle industry. The trade war between the US and China has had far-reaching effects on the global supply chain, particularly for electric vehicle manufacturers. China is the world's largest producer of electric vehicle batteries and controls a significant portion of the global supply of raw materials used in battery production. As the US and other Western nations seek to reduce their dependence on Chinese imports, automakers are being forced to find alternative sources for these materials. This shift has further strained the supply chain as new suppliers often cannot meet the same scale or cost efficiency as their Chinese counterpart. Environmental regulations are another factor affecting the electric vehicle supply chain. As governments around the world tighten regulations on carbon emissions and environmental impact, mining companies are facing increased scrutiny. In some cases, stricter environmental standards have led to the closure of mines or the imposition of fines, further reducing the availability of key materials like lithium and cobalt. While these regulations are necessary to ensure sustainable mining practices, they have contributed to delays and increased costs for electric vehicle manufacturers. For many consumers, the decision to switch to an electric vehicle comes down to more than just the cost of the car itself. While the upfront price of electric cars is a major factor, especially when compared to traditional internal combustion engine vehicles, additional concerns about infrastructure and range anxiety play an equally important role in influencing consumer decisions. These concerns are real, and they continue to be significant barriers to the widespread adoption of electric cars, despite the growing environmental awareness and governmental incentives encouraging this shift. One of the most pressing concerns for potential electric vehicle buyers is the current state of charging infrastructure in the United States. Although there has been significant growth in the number of public charging stations, particularly in urban areas, the expansion has not kept pace with the increasing number of electric vehicles on the road. Public charging stations have more than doubled in recent years, but many consumers still feel that the availability of chargers, especially in rural or less developed regions, remains insufficient to meet the needs of a fully electric vehicle fleet. This infrastructure gap is especially concerning for those who live in suburban or rural areas where public charging options are more limited. In contrast to urban centers, where fast chargers are often available at grocery stores, parking garages, and shopping centers, rural drivers may find themselves struggling to locate a reliable charging station. The charger desert phenomenon disproportionately affects regions outside of major cities, leaving many potential electric vehicle buyers hesitant to make the switch. Even in states like California, which leads the nation in electric vehicle adoption, gaps in charging infrastructure persist in rural areas, complicating the overall experience for drivers. To address this issue, governments and private companies are working to expand charging networks. Programs like the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, which aims to build a national network of 500,000 public chargers by 2030, are a step in the right direction. However, even with these efforts, the expansion is slow and consumers remain concerned about whether there will be enough charging stations to meet demand. The lack of a unified charging standard also complicates the matter, with different companies and automakers using varied systems, which adds another layer of confusion for potential buyers beyond the physical limitations of charging infrastructure. The psychological factor of charging anxiety continues to be a significant hurdle for consumers considering electric cars. Anxiety refers to the fear that an electric vehicle will run out of power before reaching a charging station, leaving drivers stranded on the road. This concern is often cited as one of the top reasons why consumers are hesitant to make the switch to electric vehicles, even as technological advancements have dramatically improved battery life and vehicle range. And by the way, the range anxiety is outdated. Did you know that? Now is it called charging anxiety? Why? Well, it is the dependability of our public charging infrastructure. Your GPS will show you chargers and where to drive, so as not to be led on the road, but there are no guarantees when you get to the charger. You will be able to charge. Historically, early electric vehicles had limited ranges, sometimes offering only 100 to 150 miles on a single charge. Today, thanks to improvements in battery technology, many modern electric cars boast ranges of 250 miles or more, with some luxury models surpassing 350 or even 400 miles per charge. Despite these advancements, the psychological impact of range anxiety persists. Consumers who are accustomed to the convenience of quickly refueling their gasoline-powered cars at a gas station in a matter of minutes are wary of the time it takes to recharge an electric vehicle. Even the fastest charging options available today still take significantly longer than filling up a gas tank, with the average fast charging session lasting 20 to 40 minutes to reach an 80% charge. So let me pause here for a moment. Many of the current public charging stations, even those labeled as a fast chargers, aren't quite as fast as you might think. Most operate below 180 kilowatts, and the actual charging speed depends more on the vehicle than the charger itself. Think of the charger as a sophisticated, it's smart outlet, like it provides the power available, but your car determines how much of that power it can handle. Typically, a vehicle will charge up to about 80% quickly, at which point the speed starts to taper off. Now, with newer fast chargers, especially DC fast chargers rated above 180 kilowatts, you can reach that 80% mark in as little as 10 to 15 minutes. But again, it all depends on your vehicle's battery capacity and its software management. All right, let's get back to where we left off. This is especially problematic for those who frequently travel long distances or live in areas where charging stations are sparse. For these drivers, the idea of having to carefully plan trips around charging station availability and potentially waiting in line once they arrive at a charger is a daunting prospect. Moreover, the variability in charging times depending on the type of charger available adds further complexity. While some drivers may have access to fast chargers, others may only find slower level 2 chargers, which can take several hours to fully charge a vehicle. While many electric vehicle owners have the ability to charge their vehicles at home, thus alleviating some concerns about public infrastructure, this option is not available to everyone. Home charging requires access to a garage or a private driveway where a level 2 charger can be installed. However, a significant portion of the US population, particularly those living in apartment buildings, condos, or homes without dedicated parking, may not have access to home charging facilities. For these consumers, reliance on public chargers is a necessity, further intensifying their concerns about charging availability. Even for those who can install home chargers, there are limitations. While home charging is convenient for daily use and shorter trips, it may not be sufficient for longer journeys, particularly if fast chargers are not readily available along the route. Additionally, the cost of installing a home charging station, which can range from $1,000 to several $1,000s depending on the setup, can be a deterrent for some buyers. These factors contribute to the overall uncertainty many consumers feel when contemplating the transition to electric vehicles. Adding to the infrastructure and range concerns, the price of uncertainty plays a crucial role in consumer hesitation. electric vehicles, despite the long-term savings in fuel and maintenance, are still a relatively new technology, and many consumers remain unsure about their longevity and resale value. The rapid pace of technological advancements means that today's state-of-the-art electric vehicle could be outdated in just a few years, leading some buyers to worry about the future value of their investment. This uncertainty is amplified by the fact that charging infrastructure is still evolving. Consumers are unsure if they will be able to find necessary infrastructure when they need it, or future technology will make their current electric cars obsolete. Will chargers be standardized? Will future vehicles offer even greater or faster charging times? These are valid concerns for those contemplating the leap to electric vehicles, and this sense of unpredictability often leads potential buyers to take a wait-and-see approach. They may delay their purchase in hopes that advancements in technology will bring longer ranges, faster charging, and more accessible infrastructure. Even though many electric cars today have ranges that would cover the daily needs of the average driver, anxiety persists due to the perception of electric vehicles and how they're used. The typical American driver travels around 30 miles a day, well within the range of even the most basic electric vehicle models. However, the perception of needing a vehicle that can go hundreds of miles without refueling is ingrained in the collective mindset. Drivers have become accustomed to the freedom that gasoline-powered vehicles offer refuel at any time, in any town, in a matter of minutes. And that convenience is hard to give up. This psychological attachment to the notion of limitless mobility without the need to plan in ahead for fuel stops makes the transition to electric vehicles more difficult. Even though modern electric vehicles are capable of meeting most people's daily driving needs, the idea of potentially running out of charge in an unfamiliar or remote area is enough to give consumers pause. Moreover, the growing but still incomplete infrastructure of charging stations across the U.S. further compounds this fear. Overcoming anxiety and consumer education and technological advancements are the key. And how do we do that? Overcoming anxiety will require a combination of technological advancements and consumer education. On the technology side, continual improvements in battery efficiency are extending the range of electric vehicles, and many automakers are investing in developing faster charging solutions. For example, some of the latest fast charging networks can recharge an electric vehicle's battery at 80% in under 20 minutes. While this is still slower than filling up a gasoline tank, it's a dramatic improvement from the early days of electric cars when charging could take several hours. Another promising development is the rollout of ultra-fast charging stations along major highways and interstates, enabling long-distance electric vehicle travel with shorter stops for charging. These stations are often equipped with high-capacity chargers that can deliver up to 350 kW, providing significant charging power in a short amount of time. Companies like Tesla and Electrify America are leading the charge, installing hundreds of these stations across the US in a bid to alleviate range anxiety and make electric vehicles more appealing for long-distance travel. But hey, there are a lot of consumer reports, even those leading companies failing the same way. It's just less notable since their infrastructure is large, but just look at how many are getting a bad reputation already. On the consumer side, education and exposure to electric vehicles can help ease concerns. Many first-time electric vehicle buyers have reported that after living with an electric car for a few months, their concerns about range and charging tend to fade. Once drivers become familiar with the vehicle's capabilities and adjust to charging routines, such as plugging in at home or topping off the battery at work, their range anxiety decreases significantly. Automakers and dealerships need to play an active role in educating consumers about the realities of electric vehicle ownership, including the true extent of their driving needs and the capabilities of modern electric vehicles. The challenges of affordability, infrastructure, and range anxiety are significant, but they are not insurmountable. The electric vehicle industry is still in its early stages, and as it matures, many of these concerns will likely diminish. With the continued expansion of public charging networks, improvements in battery technology, and ongoing consumer education, electric vehicles will become a more viable and attractive option for a broader range of people. For consumers who are on the fence, the next few years will be crucial in shaping their perceptions of electric vehicles. As more charging stations are built and as more people adopt electric cars and share their experiences, the psychological barriers of range anxiety will begin to erode. In the meantime, automakers must focus on producing affordable, practical, and reliable electric vehicles that cater to the needs of the average driver rather than focusing solely on luxury models with high price tags. The growing availability of incentives such as government rebates and tax credits will also help to bridge the gap between ICE vehicles and electric cars in terms of affordability. These financial incentives, coupled with the lower long-term operating costs of electric cars, will make the transition more palatable for consumers. Over time, as the benefits of electric vehicle ownership, both financial and environmental, become clearer, more consumers will likely make the switch. A critical yet often overlooked factor influencing the uneven adoption of electric vehicles in the United States is the internal migration patterns within the country. Over the past decade, a growing number of people have moved away from traditionally high-cost states such as California, New York, and Illinois toward more business-friendly states like Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Tennessee. This migration is not just driven by tax considerations, but also by the broader cost of living, job opportunities, and in some cases, a search for a more favorable business climate. While this shift has reshaped the economic landscape in these states, it has also had a profound impact on the adoption and acceptance of electric vehicles. States like Texas and Florida, which have seen a massive influx of new residents, often offer lower taxes, cheaper energy costs, and a regulatory environment that is more supportive of traditional fossil fuel industries. Texas, for instance, boasts one of the lowest gasoline prices in the nation, thanks in part to its role as a hub for oil production. Residents in such states are less likely to feel the immediate financial need to switch to electric cars when gas remains affordable. Additionally, the political culture in these regions tends to prioritize business interests and is often more skeptical of large-scale government-led environmental initiatives. This skepticism has influenced local policies, making it less likely for state governments to offer significant financial incentives for electric vehicle purchases or to aggressively expand electric vehicle infrastructure. Moreover, these states tend to have a higher reliance on fossil fuels for electricity generation. In Texas, for example, natural gas remains the dominant source of energy, and fossil fuels, in general, make up a significant portion of the energy mix. This can make the environmental benefits of switching to an electric vehicle seem less compelling to residents. The energy used to charge an electric vehicle may still come from fossil fuels, diminishing the perceived impact of transitioning to cleaner transportation options. This creates a perception, whether accurate or not, that driving an electric vehicle in these regions may not result in substantial environmental benefits, which further slows down adoption. Speaking of Texas and EV adoption, I'm noticing more and more electric cars on the roads and at charging stations each day. This could be partly due to the influx of people moving here, many bringing their electric vehicles with them. Cities like Austin, for example, are leading the charge with strong EV infrastructure. And even Houston and the DFW area are rapidly expanding their networks to support the growing demand. So while Texas may be behind in some areas, it's definitely making strides when it comes to electric vehicle adoption. The economic makeup of these states also plays a role in shaping attitudes toward electric vehicles. Many areas experiencing large influxes of migration, such as Texas and Florida, have strong ties to industries like oil, natural gas, and manufacturing. In these areas, residents may be more inclined to view electric cars as a threat to jobs in traditional energy sectors. This cultural and economic alignment with fossil fuels can create a sense of resistance to the broader adoption of electric vehicles, as communities fear the economic disruption that a rapid shift to electric cars might bring. Additionally, the car culture in many of these states is shaped by a long-standing preference for trucks and larger vehicles that are commonly associated with the traditional American driving experience. Texas, for instance, consistently ranks as one of the states with the highest truck sales in the nation. While electric trucks like the Ford F-150 Lightning and Rivian are gaining popularity, many drivers still prefer the more familiar gasoline-powered options. This preference for larger, fuel-hungry vehicles has further slowed the shift toward electric cars in these states. In contrast, states like California, Oregon, and Washington have not only embraced electric vehicles, but also lead the nation in electric vehicle adoption. California, in particular, has long been a pioneer in setting aggressive environmental standards, including mandates on reducing carbon emissions and phasing out gasoline-powered vehicles. The state offers substantial rebates and tax incentives for electric vehicle purchases and has implemented stringent emission standards that encourage consumers to switch to electric vehicles. Furthermore, California's higher energy costs make the financial savings from driving an electric vehicle more apparent to consumers, especially when gasoline prices rise. With the state's commitment to renewable energy and aggressive climate policies, driving an electric vehicle aligns with the cultural values of many Californians who view themselves as early adopters of green technologies. The disparity in electric vehicle adoption between regions like California and Texas highlights the broader issue of a fragmented market in the U.S. While California leads with nearly 40% of the country's electric cars, states like Texas and Florida, despite their large populations, lag significantly behind. This creates a patchwork electric vehicle market across the U.S., where access to charging infrastructure, incentives, and consumer interest in electric cars varies widely depending on where someone lives. Even when comparing California to states like Texas or Florida, electric car usage and demand are skyrocketing across the country. While we're focusing on a few key states, remember there are 50 states and adoption is growing nationwide. In addition to the West Coast, leaders in electric infrastructure adoption include Illinois, Texas, Florida, Michigan, and New Mexico, which just announced a major initiative for its residents. For a broader perspective, visit the Stable website to get the full picture. It will give you a perspective on which states are in the lead with the adoption and where is minimal or even none. The regional disparities in electric vehicle adoption have major implications for the overall growth of the industry. In states where electric vehicle adoption is slow, automakers and charging infrastructure companies may be less incentivized to invest heavily in developing a robust charging network. This lack of infrastructure further discourages consumers from switching to electric vehicles, creating a vicious cycle of low adoption and minimal investment. Conversely, in states with higher electric vehicle adoption rates, the market is already seeing the benefits of increased infrastructure investments. California, for example, has one of the most comprehensive networks of public and private electric vehicle charging stations in the world. This has made it easier for consumers to switch to electric vehicles without worrying about range anxiety or finding a place to charge their car. In these regions, the push for greater electric vehicle infrastructure continues to gain momentum, driving even more people to make the switch. This regional disparity also raises questions about equity and access to clean transportation. While residents of states like California may benefit from generous incentives and abundant charging options, those in states with fewer resources may find it more difficult to make the switch to an electric vehicle. This could widen the gap between those who can afford to drive green and those who cannot, perpetuating regional inequalities and slowing down the national transition to cleaner transportation options. To sum it up, while the electric vehicle industry is facing significant challenges, it is far from being at a standstill. The slowdown is not a signal of failure, but rather a reflection of the growing pains that accompany any industry in transition. Economic factors, political influences, and consumer concerns are real obstacles, but they are not insurmountable. To overcome these challenges, the electric vehicle industry must continue to innovate and adapt. Investments in domestic production, improvements in charging infrastructure, and policies that make electric cars more accessible to a broader range of consumers will be critical in the coming years. Companies that can navigate these challenges and position themselves for long-term growth will be well positioned to thrive in the future. The transition to electric transportation is inevitable, but it will take time and a concerted effort from all stakeholders, manufacturers, governments, and consumers to make it a reality. In the meantime, those who are willing to adapt and invest in the future of green technology will be the ones who benefit the most. Before I let you go, make sure to stay tuned because we've got some amazing episodes coming your way that you won't want to miss. We'll continue exploring how new technologies and investments are shaping our future, so keep your ears open and your minds charged up. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on Q in Charge. Over and out.